She is a graduate of Texas A&M University with participation as a research assistant. In her spare time, she is an active volunteer in a variety of community events. But before we get into why trusting your own judgment is essential for personal growth with Prisha, my name is Maria Kauffman, and I'm a life coach. And today, I'm drinking some vitamin water, actually. Are you drinking anything, Prisha?
Nope. I think the last sip of water I had was like a couple hours ago.
You've had a long day of work.
Yeah. Nope, it's all good. I'm very excited. I think I'm pretty hydrated for today.
Good. It's so nice to have you here with us. Prisha, tell us about your earliest signs of genius. What do you remember from elementary school that might have set you apart and gave you some kind of indication that you were going to follow a certain career path?
So if I were to tell you that at a very young age, I knew that I wanted to be a software engineer, I would be lying to you. Because
yes,
if I had that kind of clarity in life, I think there would have been a couple Nobel Prize awards behind me, but I did not have that clarity at that young age. However, I think I was honestly the kind of child, I guess, like to my knowledge and what people have also told me, I've been someone as a kid, I was someone that like always like went from like one thing to another. So as a kid, I wanted to be a teacher because I really liked the teacher that I, was under. And then I started doing dance and I was like, you know what, I could do this my whole life. And I think I've thought of every possible profession to ever exist. I think by the time I was even in high school, actually, when I applied for colleges, I actually didn't apply with a computer engineering degree. I actually applied into aerospace and aerospace engineering and a couple of comp sci degrees. So I will say that my journey to where I am hasn't really been a straight line, but I think it definitely did teach me a lot of things. So I was still like learning exactly what I needed in order to succeed in what I'm doing now.
Great.
So
was there anything in math class? Did you know that you were pretty good in math or science?
So I think the connection of dots really happened in college, but a lot of my time, I think growing up was just me experimenting with different things. So I remember like math used to be so hard for me as a middle schooler because I was like, what are fractions? Someone would give me a mixed fraction and I was like, oh man, I did not understand what's happening here. So it's nice reminiscing how far that journey has come along.
Right.
But I think honestly, you're right. Like I think I was really like passionate about math in high school, even in college. It was something that I was really interested in, and physics was something that although it was very difficult, it was something that I would take a lot of time to really learn, because there was a part of me that like whenever I was like doing physics, I was like, why is this so difficult? Like, what is a way that I can learn this? And I think that, and also chemistry, was something that I really enjoyed.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I think after like my first year in college, what I did realize, actually, I don't think it's unfortunately a very early memory, but it was the most important, I think most significant memory that caused me to join computer engineering. I was in freshman year of high school and I did computer science for the first time ever, and I was scared. I had some of the brightest minds in my class, and they had some like little more experience in programming than I did, and it was intimidating to me how easily they would just like get it right. And I used to be stuck there, and I'm like, Java does not make sense to me. And I remember like walking out of that class, like telling my dad, you'll never see me in a computer science class ever. Like get that idea out of your head. I am not going to do comp sci. This is not for me. But I just think it was a different time. And I remember my first year in college, like cut to 4 years later, we had this general engineering class that required us to like do a little bit of programming, and it was in Python. And at that time, I was with my like now really good friends, and like I was meeting them for the first time, and they're mechanical engineers and chemical engineers and industrial. And I remember like working projects with them, and they would be like, I don't understand this. And it's almost as if like I felt like I could relate so much with that. And I was able to sort of get programming this time around. And I was sitting with my friends. I would like work with them on projects. If they were stuck, I used to help them. And I think that's sort of when everything sort of came together for me. Like, like the bigger plan in hand, like realizing, okay, I'm good at math. I can teach people code, so I do understand it to some degree, and I really like the problem solving that came with it. Like we had some projects we had to code, and I really enjoyed that part. And yeah, like towards the end of the spring semester, gave my dad a call. I was like, don't smile too hard. I think I'm thinking of changing my major. He's like, oh, what? I'm like, computer engineering. So yeah, I think that's honestly one of the most significant memories, because I feel like as a freshman, I was so scared because I was not doing well. And I think when I gave myself that time and patience to, basically get back at it, I was able to, do well. So yeah, that's something that I think about a lot.
Cool. So help us understand then too, even in those early years, first of all, let's talk about parental support.
Yeah.
It sounds like, maybe at least from your father's side, that there might have been some encouragement to go into the computer science realm. But
Yeah.
what were the earliest memories, even as far as those parenting influences that help kind of guide you?
Yeah, I think I'm forever in debt of my parents always being supportive. I think that's one thing that I will always be grateful for. And I think one thing in particular that I really liked is that them supporting me always like gave me that encouragement to experiment with different things before I really found what I really wanted to do. So I think so just for context, my dad also graduated in a computer engineering degree. Okay. So one thing that I don't know why this was so prominent in my growing years, but I always wanted to be different. Like I think I was very much the rebellious kid, giving my parents slightly a hard time growing up, but I always wanted to do something different. And I saw how much my dad was respected in his work and, around his colleagues. And I saw how much he loved what he did. But then there was something in me that I was like, I don't know why I had this like feeling like I don't want to like do this because everyone's going to think that I did it because of him. And I'm my own person. I need to figure this out. So I used to always give them the most unorthodox, I guess, in some ways, or unconventional, actually, better way to say it is like options. Like, I want to be an astronaut, and they were like, "How? You have fear of heights?" But jokes aside, I think my earliest memories is like my parents never really told me that I should do something. You should be doing engineering, or you should be doing this. I think they gave me a lot of space as a child to just be good at things. So I used to love dancing at the time. I think I didn't really get very super serious academically until like high school. So my earliest memories is actually like both of my parents being like a mentor to me. My dad comes from like an engineering background, like I said. My mom comes from more of like the arts and humanities background. So I've had a good composure of both of those walks of life. And so my earliest memories, I think, are like my dad teaching me it's like a weekend, Sunday afternoon, I'm sitting there with my homework, and mixed fractions is obviously getting to me. And we're sitting there, my dad is like scratching his head, and he's like, "Do you get this?" And I'm like with a straight face looking at him and like, no.
Not at all.
So my mom used to teach me more of like the social studies and the history, because that's something that she studied. in college. And so she used to teach me that in English. And my dad used to be the one that I used to go for like science and chemistry and engineering. So I think I had I'm very thankful that I had that kind of support. My mom really wanted me to go into law. So
Oh.
yeah. And so, but again, it was never like you should. It was more like, you seem to really think through your stances. So I think you would make a really good lawyer, Prisha.
Awesome. Well, that's interesting that you talked about the dance component, because that was the other part of my question. You had mentioned that earlier, and
Yes.
I'm curious then, in those earlier years, was there a nice balance in your life, between
Absolutely.
studying, dance, all those things?
I think I was like a very energetic kid. I think to this day, some degree of that is still channeled in my life. But I think I used to love dancing. I used to play badminton. I used to go and play with my friends, like 5 p.m. on the clock, and I was ready in my like clothes and everything at the door, telling my mom I'll be back at 7, because those 2 hours were like my playing time block, and I think that stuck around until I was 12. I think. So my childhood, I was never like really like fond of one particular thing. Like I said, I was kind of jumping from different things. I used to do art. I used to love painting. I used to do dance. I used to do like Indian classical dance, and so much of my time used to go there, and I used to really enjoy that. And every year I used to pick a new hobby. I don't know why. I used to come to my mom and I was like, I really need to buy this, and I used to give her a convincing argument why she needs to be buying me oil pastels, even though I don't know anything about how to use oil pastels.
Ooh, that's probably a pretty good skill set to practice, and a nice way to just explore life in general, and to always have, like an opportunity, I guess.
Yeah.
So with that diversity, was negotiation skills, actually sounds like that was something that you were maybe crafting, maybe unknown, but to negotiate on a hobby is a pretty good skill to develop. Were
Yeah.
there things then from all of those experiences and those hobbies that were also then informing and helping you in, the mathematical or the science world?
Certainly. I think, we don't realize these things until we're much older, and we kind of notice our subconscious patterns, and we go, okay, there's a reason why I do certain things and I don't think about it too much. And I think for me, I guess like the combination of my parents being very supportive with what I did, and also I think my ability to just jump from one thing in another, I think it kind of gave me the confidence, especially in college, to not feel too taken aback if I was changing my major or I was changing the way I wanted to kind of like, switch, my degree, or even switch my career paths. And I think it gave me a lot of, I would say, it was like my way of giving the love back to myself, and be like, every every point in my life, I'm making the decision based on the information that I know at that point in time, right? And so I think being able to take risk really did stem from how chaotic I was as a kid. And I don't take my experiences in childhood as like, oh, I was just very hyperactive, or I was just like, very bored. I think it was a lot of like, I just enjoyed learning. I think that has been one thing that even to this day I really like doing, is like putting myself in a place I'm not familiar, I don't have experience in, and then just being like, okay, what of my own, behavior and life experiences I can use to better understand this problem.
Right, because the title that we kind of worked on here was why trusting your judgment is very essential for personal growth.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, from what you're telling us, some of those, that foundation was being laid in those early, before you even knew about it, right? So now we can kind of reflect and be like, oh, somehow in all of this, I was practicing, and in a safe container, maybe even with your parents' support and mentoring, to really trust my own judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I really enjoy the segue that you had here, because it kind of gave me a sense of like self-realization as to like um why I actually do believe that trusting your own judgment is so essential for personal growth, because I see that personally in my life as well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, help us understand how you were making how you went from high school into college. What was that decision-making process like for you? How did it become clear, not only what you wanted to study, but where you wanted to study at? What can you share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually moved to the States when I was 13 years old. So I came in like into eighth grade. No clue how the American education system works. Uh, I'm sitting around people with so much diversity, and basically trying to find my own voice in that crowd. And so I will say, like, it wasn't the easiest thing to do, because there are like a lot of different things that I had to at least manage, like figuring out how the school works, and then figuring out how to succeed in that, figuring out how to find people and like a sense of community, because it's essentially like you're moving, like leaving your home and rebuilding your own community again, right, from scratch.
Right.
So a lot of unknowns were in front of me when I started high school. And one of the things that I realized is that I was in a fairly competitive high school. And so to see people that are so hardworking and smart, and, I'm sitting in the room with them, and they seem to know it. Like, they seem to know how to crack the K-12 education in the States, what classes to take. I remember my counselor was like, do you want to take regular and honors or AP? And I was like giving her this like face. I was like, I had one class I had to take back in India, and there are like 3 different versions of one class. That's so crazy. So I think like and like another thing I used to hear my classmates say is that, oh, I want to go to UT Austin because my parents went there, or like I want to go to A&M because my parents went there. Like I'm like a 4th-generation Aggie, and I was like, you're going to the same college as your parents? I am here fighting like my parents because I don't want to end up like that. Like I want to be different. But people here are like, that's like a part of their family tradition. So I think, and another thing was like, I think the first one in my family, like at least my immediate family, that was like going to do college here in the States. And so I was really nervous because I feel like everyone had some sort of benchmark or reference, and I seemed to have to do that research on my own. So I guess like the part of the process, like, from high school to college, figuring out was entirely like facts, like which college is good, how much am I willing to let my parents pay?
Yes.
But another thing was like also knowing that no matter where I end up, that is a risk that I'm going to be taking. Because I think where really hearing my own judgment came to play initially was college, because so many people say so many different things about where you want to go. And
Yes.
I think that's a lot of pressure that I've noticed in high school students, because I kind of went through the same thing, when I was figuring out colleges. There's a lot of pressure on like going to the best of the best, the creme de la creme. And, if you don't get into the best colleges, then you're not going to succeed. And there's a huge misunderstanding, but also like something that very largely is said that, oh, if you don't get into this college, then, oh, you're going to like a 2nd-tier college. Okay, now it's going to be harder for you to succeed. And what was really crazy to me is that when I started my work here in Goldman, and I was like at this orientation and I was meeting so many different people, I realized so many people came from universities that I had never heard of.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And like that, I mean, not to say that that is not a belief I held in me, because I myself was like, I had people that told me that A&M would, A&M is not part of the Ivy League. Like, are you sure? Like, so there is like, obviously, it's a very common thing to hear. And there might be some truth to that. I mean, if you are an Ivy League graduate, of course your future is, spectacularly bright. But what I really love to know is that I was meeting these people and finding myself relate to so many people that came from many different colleges. And it's almost as if that college was not the decision factor. It was their ethics, their work ethic, their personality, their experience that they created despite coming from a college that probably wasn't known for the degree that they, came from.
Yeah. So it kind of flipped that whole idea that in those early stages that's informing you on how to pick or where to pick a college, to lead to a certain path or maybe a success route, that all got dispelled once you actually got into the work world.
Yeah, because, I felt this like, I felt like a burden off my shoulders and I didn't realize I was carrying it for so long.
Yeah.
Because, honestly speaking, I think in high school, things are a lot more competitive. It doesn't have to be university. It could be rank. It could be what you made on your SATs or what your class ranking is. And then depending on that, also kind of like seeing, okay, where everyone is ending up. And then also feeling like, am I going to be successful if I join this? And the thing is, A&M, I think, was my only college that I visited. And this is a really funny story. You know how people usually do like college visits during their junior, senior year?
Yes.
So I went up to my parents and I was like, I want to take a day off so we can go college visit. And they were like, why do you want to do college visits? And I was like, people do them so they can see how the college is like. And they said, my dad, I remember that he's like, first get into the college, then we'll go visit.
First things first.
There's so much truth to that. I was like, and I kind of just quietly went back in my room and continued prepping for SAT.
Okay. Okay, Dad.
But he was so right, because I think it would have bummed me out that if I saw the campus and A&M's campus is gorgeous. I immediately loved the people there and the culture there. And so I think I would have been really bummed if I loved it and then I didn't
get it in.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Right. Well, along those lines, as you're going from high school into college, you start to have a form an idea because you're picking a career path. Were you targeting Goldman Sachs or, and, right now, you have a title that I've never heard before as a core engineering analyst. I never even knew that was an option or a thing. How did that arrow or that trajectory go for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been quite literally a dream come true to work for the Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's still hard to accept that. But
it's like pinch yourself. You still want to pinch yourself.
I still do pinch myself. I'm like, maybe I'm on an externship or something's happening. There's a prank.
That is awesome. Good for you.
But I'm really, really thankful for this opportunity that I have. I think there is that trusting your judgment part. So like I said, I am an international student, and when it comes to experiencing different pressures, there's different kind of expectations and pressure that we, kind of hear in high school. By the time you come around in college, it's like, okay, now that you you got into the college and, you're trying to, navigate your degree, question comes, okay, how do we do internships? How do we explore internships? How do we explore getting a job? And, as an international student, I think that's something that a lot of us really relate with, is this fear that what if we don't have a job offer at the end of our degree? What is our life trajectory like after that? So I think there was a lot of what ifs. And so in the midst of that, it was something that I really told myself time to time, is that I'm doing the best I can. So
important.
Yeah.
So important. Good for you.
That's
actually.
I didn't intern with Goldman. So Goldman was like right out of like, it was my full-time application. I did apply for internship, but now I'm glad that I got the full time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think everyone in freshman year is like, if we get a good internship, that means we have a job offer, which means then we are set. And so freshman year, I really had to kind of tell myself, okay, I'm gonna focus on the first thing, like one thing at a time. What would internship applications look for? Well, they obviously are looking for people with zero work experience, right? That's like the bare minimum. So, okay, what can I do in college that can, equalize to having a professional experience? So kind of like working backwards. And I think it was really important to give myself that grace to take it slow. To not sort of rush that process of like, if you don't get it right the first time, you're not going to succeed. So like freshman year, I was very involved in different organizations because I really saw the importance. It's like the one thing I noticed with like A&M organizations is the kind of professional development that they focus on and the networking. So those were the two skill sets that I was like, okay, I'm going to try to figure out how to be better at networking. I'm going to figure out how to be better at like leading and doing your responsibilities in organization. Then taking that skill, coming into sophomore year and seeing, okay, let's try our shot with internships. And I didn't really get any at the end of sophomore year. But I didn't let that like demotivate me. I was like, okay, well, junior year is really when people, sort of hire on a greater volume. So just kind of keeping that pace. And I was like, okay, how can I add on to this experience? And I think my first research experience was actually in a hardware lab. And I did that actually right when I got into like my computer engineering degree. And that was my sophomore year. So I was like, okay, if I can get an internship, maybe I can, explore what research looks like, what it is, like, working with a professor and, when they have, projects that go for years. And I essentially that, research led to getting my first internship opportunity at a startup company and at the end of my junior year. And then, basically taking everything that I have done in the last 4 years, praying to God and hitting the submit button on the Goldman Sachs full-time application and then saying, I did my best.
Right. Awesome.
So, yeah.
I love the strategy. I love the openness. I love the patience also along that, because there's a lot of happening, so every semester probably feels a bit of intensity as you're going through college, right? It's like you're just kind of getting through that next step. Are you dancing?
I stopped dancing because college got too difficult for me.
I was gonna say that's a heavy workload. I mean, you're doing some volunteer work. You're obviously doing some research assistant stuff. You're pretty well educated. Not only academically, but kind of in these other extracurriculars. So good for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it was really important for me to create short goals. And I think that is something that even like when I'm working, that's like something that I try to focus on, because I think keeping the longer goals sometimes gets really overwhelming and it adds a lot of unnecessary pressure. So all of those experiences, whether it was like starting off in organizations or figuring out research or figuring out internships, those were short goals for me. So that's why I guess like sometimes I think I'm like, I don't realize how all 4 years of my college have been done, because I'm always like, I gotta do this. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm on to the next target and then on to the next. So I think it all, at the end of the day, it all built on top of one another.
Yeah.
And I think it continues to follow that same pattern even today.
So what was that like then, getting to graduation, and help us, through your story of, landing that full-time job, and, what was that all like for you?
So I will be honest, I don't think I was very optimistic about getting a full-time job. And I think that also comes as part of like, the noise that surrounds everybody, right? There's always a fear, that fear of unknown, that like you don't know what's ahead of you. And so that fear is often like, blanketed by some very extremely blanket statements. International people won't get jobs. The market is bad. If you get an internship, you should feel lucky. Not a lot of like international students are only hired by FANGs or like the Silicon Valley companies, and that definitely was not motivating at all to hear, especially so frequently throughout college, because it kind of added to that fear of like, what happens if none of this works out, which is always the fear. And at the end of the day, that is like a fear that we carry. And there's always everything, right? Like, oh, I've heard that this company doesn't take applications if your GPA is below a certain point. I was taking electrical engineering, and so it was a very humbling part of computer engineering, because as my coursework or progress or success in computer science was indirectly related with my success in electrical engineering.
So nicely stated.
Yes. I think I could have still done well. I think it was just a skill set that I needed more time to do well in. But as those grades would come up, they would be balanced by the grades that were coming from the electrical classes. So nice. I was like, man, that summa cum laude is like, is going further and further away.
Yep. Out in the distance.
Out in the distance. So you didn't, there's a lot of noise about it too.
A lot of noise, but you're not losing sight on some level. It sounds like you still had some form of, staying committed to the baby steps, I'll call them, or one step at a time.
I think I was just very persistent in knowing that, like, even though I got the grades I did, I think there was something in me that was like, I know I worked hard I worked hard for this. So yes, I used to feel anxious about like, oh, what if I could have, done better on this exam, or what if, I, had a different grade. But at the end of the day, I used to really I think there was something in me that was like unshaken, was like, if an interviewer were to ask me about this, I know I can say, I know I can respond about this, because I think that's what that is a quality that really pushed me, because in the back of my head, and I'm not saying that what people around me were telling me was entirely wrong. There were companies that legitimately only hired after a certain threshold, and at the end of the day, we don't know what I don't know why Goldman chose me at the end of the day. I took that offer letter and I signed that thing, and I was like, I will sign this before they change their mind. Nice. But at the end of the day, we don't know what they're looking for and what really, so everybody is making assumptions, and I'm guilty of that myself. And so, sometimes it was really overwhelming to hear it constantly that like, the reason I'm not hearing back from these companies is because of my GPA, or it could be the fact that my internship wasn't at like a bigger company, or so the impact wasn't there. And I kind of thought to myself, like coming back, and I was like, that experience that I had in an internship gave me so much more depth of what a software developing life cycle is, and like working in the middle of it, and having my coworkers trust me with that. I mean, that was an honor in itself. And so I knew that what I did was, I was passionate for it. So I just kind of said, hoping that they can get that opportunity to really ask me those questions, so I can really show them that I'm someone that is really passionate, and I'm someone that will not stop trying.
Yeah, awesome.
That was something that I really reminded myself throughout college.
Yeah, well, that's so important, because I trust too that, what they also talk about is when you're in an interview and you're answering those questions from that experience, there's an obvious level of confidence that comes with it. And like you said, that you worked hard for these things. And when you communicate that, you have that opportunity basically to share that confidence. And like you said, that's important on two sides, for you, it's so nice it's actually refreshing to hear that you don't know why you got hired. At the same time, when people don't get hired, they make a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
On things, and maybe that's not so true either. So that just makes a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, I think I'm really honest about that part of me, because I don't say I don't know as a way to sort of like feel insecure about my role. I think, I just felt really relaxed once I got that job offer. I was like, I can sleep peacefully now.
Sleep easily.
But yeah, I personally feel like at the end of the day, the reason I say that is because we don't know why we don't know exactly what it was about us that made people think, yes, this person is a good fit in our team. Because a lot of it has to do with culture fitting. It has to do with competency, and like their rubric is very different from, I don't think I'll ever get a hold of that either. So I've made peace with that fact. But I will also say, like, it doesn't have to be, just people that, my like fellow classmates, because I don't think I felt too much of that noise, like personally, if it was like people of my own, college friends and like other people in computer science and engineering. I think it also comes from like, when you're going to career fairs and it's like your first time talking to with so many people that are from different walks of life, and they're like, been in the company for years, and they're looking at your resume, and some of them are saying, oh, it's impressive, oh, this is good, and some of them will say, you need to work on it. And so when you get that kind of mixed experience from, especially experienced people, it does, sort of take a toll. I mean, I remember the first time I went like for like an internship thing, and one of my recruiters was like, Prisha, I think you should really, specialize in one thing. You're doing too many different things. But then on the other hand, I went to a different company and they said, you're showing that you're like, you can experiment and fit in a different, thing. You seem like you were quick to learn. That's a good skill. Why don't you show more of that? So I think that's like, I know we're talking about like trusting your own judgment, which seems to be like a very central topic to today's conversation. And I think that's what I really want to highlight, is that it's not to say that people saying things is bad. It's just that what people are saying is coming from their perspective that they have seen in their walk of life. And so nobody really knows you better than you yourself. So,
and you have to be you.
Yeah, and you have to be yourself. Because I'm gonna be honest, I loved that part of me in college that was jumping from one thing to another. So I'm in a sense very grateful that like they recognized that early on, and they said, hey, she seems to, I think she's cut out for something else. Because if I probably got in that company and I was just doing one thing, I probably would have thought that was too like monotonous for me, right? No shade. No shade whatsoever. But yeah, I think it's all about, at the end of the day, just being honest and transparent with what you like and what really excites you about work.
So important. Yeah, because now
to put your best foot forward.
Yeah, because now you get to go to work at Goldman Sachs every day. What's that like?
Oh, it's definitely fast paced. I used to think that traders are the only ones that you see walking at like 20 miles an hour across the building, but I do seem to find myself doing the exact same thing as an engineer for the firm. I think it's very exciting. It's fast paced. There's always something to do, and I think working with Goldman Sachs is like, I don't know how to say this like in like a sentence, but it's like when you're on like level 5 or level 3, and then someone goes, I trust you to handle a level 20 project. So, and having a mentor and like having a management that says you will be fine. So sometimes, I mean, early on, like once, like I remember the first ticket I ever worked on, I was like overwhelmed because I was like, oh my gosh, like this is fast. Like this is a lot to learn. And, people have been here for years, and how do you really step into your shoes and, you know, show them that, yeah, I can, you know, work and add significance to the success of our project. But I think it's been really supportive
Nice.
to this day.
Yeah, pretty important. Yeah.
There is a like a learning curve, and what I really like is the fact that they give you the space to be independent, in the sense when you're figuring out your own solutions. I felt that. I think it was a huge thing for me, like, that I felt really happy about, was that even when I was working on the first ticket, my manager actually gave me that freedom to be like, okay, you're going to come up with a few solutions on how this is. So while I was learning how to, you know, learn different things and figuring out the project and the environment and everything, I was also given the same kind of trust that, like, okay, once you're done figuring out, I want to know how you problem solve. So it's kind of like, it's not like I'm being spoon fed or anything, or like they're walking me through, like, you know, every little step. They're kind of like, they kind of throw you in the deep end and they say, it'll be scary. Ask us questions.
Yes.
But but they do that knowing that you will make it onto the other side of it with a lot more knowledge, and then you become the person that people come to if they have questions. And I think that's they have an incredible focus on personal leadership, which I really appreciate.
Wow, that sounds awesome. No wonder why you like it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad where I ended up. Thankful.
Yeah. So are you so busy that you're just taking one step at a time? Do you have any idea of where your career, you know, that you want it to go? What are your hopes for the future, and maybe even for women's leadership of the future, given what you're doing now?
I think the biggest skill that I learned from college was mentorship. When I was part of an organization called Institute for the Education of Asian American Leaders. I actually did not say that correctly. Institute for the Development and Education for Asian American Leaders. It's called IDEAL. And one thing that I really learned from those 3 years, were, like, you know, being part of that organization, is how important mentorship is in community building and also personal leadership. So I think that was a very significant moment of my time, because I think it really paved the way for what I see my career also looking like. I think right now, I think it's going to be almost my second month at work. So I have a few things in mind, but I would like to keep it to myself right now.
Yeah,
But I have thought about, like, you know, my future you know, in terms of Goldman Sachs as well. And one thing I realized is that the kind of support that I get from from my managers, from my coworkers, I want to be able to pay it forward. And I think mentorship is something that builds on itself. And so to be able to learn something, I mean, they have, you know, given me knowledge that they struggled with when they were, you know, in my shoes. And so that gives me a lot of motivation to sort of pay, like, you know, pay it back, and, you
absolutely.
know, work. Oh, I think it, like,
Yep.
oh,
We had a little,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, there was like a little lag. My apologies. But to be able to receive that mentorship, I think it really motivates me to sort of understand the kind of culture that Goldman has, and be able to really pay it forward. So I think some of my short goals really is to continue honestly, genuinely continue learning, because there is a lot to learn and a lot to do. As part of my job. So to keep an open mind on that, but also picking up how people are approaching leadership and how people are approaching support, and being able to embody that for maybe the next generation of new analysts that come to Goldman. I would love to look into any, like, future mentorship opportunities within Goldman, and also, like, as with work and time and experience, if the position does advance from an analyst, I No pressure on my manager.
No pressure whatsoever.
No pressure.
Something tells me you're going to be pretty successful, though.
Thank you. But when that time does come, I would love to really take the experiences that I had in college and even right now, and remember them so that I can sort of create another like, breath of fresh air when it comes to leadership. When it comes to women's leadership, I think that is one thing that I genuinely am very, very passionate about, because I was in computer engineering where there were not a lot of women that I graduated with. I have seen a lack of women in this field. Although I'm really proud of the growth that we have had over the years. In STEM, especially in like technologies and engineering, that we still are a minority, a growing minority, which I'm happy about. But there is a lot of good work to do. And so one thing that I'm really passionate about is figuring out how women can, how to make new people that are just starting off jobs or just starting their career be able to find the confidence and the right kind of noise to really, make them a better leader and a better, more self-reliant and self-aware individual. Because I think all of those things are connected with each other. I think an ability to know yourself helps you develop empathy for others and, understand others better. And I think when you develop that sort of culture, that has to make its way into your own, unique style of leadership. So that is one thing that I would love to be a part of, especially whether it is Goldman Sachs or even externally outside of that, is to really continue, sharing the word. I hope that today, whoever is watching this, even if one person can hear the stories of me, I hope they can see that even a person like me that really realized that computer engineering was her thing in college, much later in my life, and, make it out fine. I hope that really empowers other people, because I think one thing that as women's we tend to do is that we are, I don't societally expected to be perfectionist. Women don't always apply to applications where they are not 100% satisfying all the requirements. And that is a fact. And I think that culture of perfectionism and, fear of failure is very ingrained in a lot of women, especially in STEM. I have experienced it. A lot of people around me have experienced it. And I read about it even now to this day. And, you have been working with so many women. So you have that, you have the, stats for that as well. So I think one thing I really want to encourage women to do even in college, and I think that's kind of my focus, college and early career, to be more forgiving and to be more grateful to their process and their patience and their time that they're taking to develop their skills, because they are good enough. And that glass ceiling is quite literally meant to be broken, and it can only be broken when more of us are learning and passing that knowledge on to the other people.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that so eloquently. It's so important to hear. When I started my co-ops and my career, mentoring really wasn't a thing yet, but those few and far between people who were willing to share their knowledge and to help me out, like you said, I had that same gratitude. It was like I was so happy that somebody was willing to take the time and give me some attention, because then I wanted to pay that forward 10 times over, because I knew the struggles that I was going through, and I didn't want to feel held back or, I love the way you talk about the noise too. So much noise to carve through, but in the end, to really trust your own judgment and to follow your heart.
Yeah, I would just like to add to that, as we are speaking, there is a girl somewhere in the world right now that is creating the next best thing, the next biggest innovation as we speak. And I have been grateful to have that kind of support from family, and also with the experiences that I had to be able to reflect and grow. But for those girls that are sitting in in any part of the world right now that have felt that their skills are like that they think too much, or their innovation is not that important, or they're not going to be enough, I hope that more conversations like this really show them that they are enough, because they can have the best idea and the best skill sets to lead lead an organization, or to start their own company, and do great, achieve great heights in their career, and they could only be stopped by the noise. And I think that's why I feel so passionately about really trusting your own judgment. And that is a skill set that does take a time. It takes a certain amount of time to develop. But through this conversation, the one thing I would say is, if you can at least recognize that there is a noise that consciously or subconsciously does affect our everyday decisions, then you're one step closer to knowing your own voice and your own gut feeling. Because honestly, if you're trying to do something that is unconventional, you will have many people that'll tell you otherwise, because the fear of failure and the fear of unknown, everyone is affected by it, and it's so powerful sometimes. But make sure that your resilience is more powerful than that.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Absolutely priceless, because those thoughts and those ideas and those women absolutely matter immensely, for the future and where we need to take, a prosperous world. So
Yeah,
so thank you for talking about that so nicely.
of course.
Do you have an inspirational quote or something that you would like to share with the audience?
Yes. So I kind of came across this quote like a couple months ago, and I feel like it really pieced together all the emotions that I felt towards just like knowledge and empathy and personal development. And it says the highest form of knowledge is empathy. And I think that is something that I really carry with myself every day, because I think the best way to approach life that has worked for me personally is the ability to walk in and say, I don't know. And having that empathy for myself, and also having that empathy for others, to be like, okay, it's okay to fail. It's okay to not know, not have the answer right away. It's okay to take a pause, take a step back, and be like, this may be something new that I haven't tried. Can I be more forgiving to myself while I try to navigate this? And I think knowledge is the only way that we can combat our fear of unknown, because we can turn that fear of uncertainty and uncertainty and lack of clarity into a pursuit of knowledge. And I think when we start to change that narrative, we start to, kind of go a little easy on ourselves, take away the toxicity of perfectionist and, work, this perfect work ethic culture, and really be like, I can assure people that my quality work can be good, but that also comes with a little bit of time and pursuit of knowledge. So yeah, I think that is my quote.
Awesome. Very, very wise, coming from such a young woman leader. Thank you so much for your expertise. Thank you for being a guest on the show and for sharing all of this wisdom. In the show notes, I will certainly let people know how to get connected with you on LinkedIn, if that's okay.
Of course, yes.
And thank you so much, Prisha, for being on the show today.
Of course. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was honestly a great time for me. Thank you so much.
Coffee Time with Kauffman is the comfortable place to discuss women's leadership, because I am on a mission to help the world discover the truth about what women are capable of. When you are ready for your leadership mastery makeover, go to mariakaufman.com and click on Consult a Coach, where you can schedule time with me for an empowerment session. Have a great week. Enjoy your adventures and journey responsibly. Thanks again, Prisha.